This might sound crazy to some of y'all, and y'all probably didn't know this, but back in 2020, Canon actually dominated the global market share of cameras with 47.9% of the supply. Fast forward 3 years later, they have lost about 7% of that market share, and guess who was right on their tail with a 10% increase? You guessed it, Sony. I've been an avid Canon user for the past 10 years, and a couple weeks ago I just decided to up and sell all of my gear. In this video I want to talk about why in the world is it that creators are deciding to leave Canon. Let's get it. For the longest time, I've said that Canon is like the Apple of camera companies, in the sense that they tend to push innovation slow, and they only really start to implement features after they've seen that they have been successful for other camera companies. I also think they're a lot like Apple when it comes to ecosystem as well. Like, they got an extensive set of lenses, they're all backwards compatible with adapters, you can use old batteries. It's just like having a MacBook, having an iPhone, an Apple Watch. Once you locked into Canon, you locked in. But I think that this is starting to hurt them. The difference between Apple and Canon is that when Apple implements a feature into their devices late, they improve the feature. They even name it some cool Apple name. But somewhere along the line, Canon stopped doing that. Like, think about in-body image stabilization, for instance. Canon was late on this wave, and when it dropped, it sucked, at least on the wide end. Or like, what about Canon being one of the companies to be the last to offer an in-camera log option for their consumer mirrorless cameras? When it dropped, it was okay, but we used to have to download CineStyle. Y'all remember that? What I'm trying to say is that Canon has lost a lot of its magic that we were once used to back when the 1DX Mark II was the camera to buy, or when Canon got on the wave of flip screens really early. And I think ultimately this has a lot to do with the mid-response to the R5 II getting announced, which we'll talk about here in a second. But ultimately, I feel like one of the biggest reasons why creators are deciding to leave the brand is that they're just tired of showing up to the party late with features that just aren't as good. Now, this makes a lot of sense as to why Canon might be losing some of its popularity, but why has Sony become so popular? I think that this goes without saying, but we have all had our homepage and subscription feed absolutely obliterated whenever a new Sony camera is announced, with creators all dropping a review at the exact same time. I personally feel like influencer marketing is a huge reason why Sony's market share has been growing. I've had the opportunity to work with Canon and Sony, and being on the inside, I gotta say that Canon is very selective with the creators they decide to work with, while Sony will literally show anybody love. Like, it don't matter what race you are, what genre you're in, the size of your audience, as long as you up and coming, Sony will show you love, and that's dope. But it just is what it is. You can clearly see the difference whenever new cameras get released from both of these brands. It's a way higher amount of creators that have access to these cameras while they're unreleased on the Sony side than it is with Canon, and it's a lot more diverse to creators that have it. Not even from just race, but just audience size as well. It just is what it is. If you constantly see your favorite creator online bragging and boasting about how great their camera is and showing you amazing images from it, it's only but a matter of time until you're gonna start looking into the camera. It's obvious that influencer marketing is a huge reason, but this is another really huge reason. I feel like Sony is the fastest at correcting course. Hear me out. Back when we was all using Sony A6300s, I know y'all remember that, the biggest complaint was that Sony's skin tones looked extremely green. And what they do, they went back and they revamped the entire color science. Back when Canon's dual pixel autofocus was everything to rave about, people said Sony's autofocus wasn't as reliable, it was janky. What they do, they went back to the drawing board and they revamped the entire system. And now I would say that Sony's autofocus is a lot more stickier than Canon's, personally speaking. Being an avid user of Canon for a long time, that's my opinion. Then, back when we was using the A6300, and that thing would almost explode every time you would take it out in 100-degree heat, overheating was crazy. What they do, they went back and they corrected course in their flagship models. This makes sense though, because if you think about it, Sony is not only developing the majority of sensor tech that you're using today, but they also drop a new camera like every other week. And in those cameras, they're consistently updating and changing and improving the mistakes that they've made in previous models. And sometimes I feel like Canon just don't learn from their mistakes. Mosquitoes killing me right now. I really want to talk about why I feel like the reception for the R5 Mark II has generally been bad, but I gotta tell y'all how the lighting in here is so fresh. A couple weeks ago, I changed all of the lighting in my office exclusively to Amaran. Here's why. One really fire thing about these lights is that I can control them all from the palm of my hand using a brand new Amaran app. This light back here, if I want it to be more dim, if I want it to be more bright, if I want to adjust the color temperature, if I want to throw an effect on it, I can do all of this from the palm of my hand using a brand new Amaran app, which is crazy. I forgot to mention the new Amaran app is also available for desktop as well. It's compatible with Stream Deck, has all of the same functionality as the mobile app, and is perfect for streamers out there who want to keep everything central to their computer. These Amaran lights are made specifically for creators. This 150C has a bright 150 watt output and has RGB and bicolor functionality. You pair that with the Light Dome Mini SE, and you got perfect talking head videos like this. This secondary light here is the 100XS, a great affordable key light option also, but I got to pair it with the Spotlight SE mount, so I'm able to get very specific beams of light and even create some really cool shapes. And these two lights right here above the desk are the PT4C pixel tubes. Dope thing about these is that they're very slim profile, you can use pixel effects, and they're pretty bright. For all of my filmmakers checking out this video wondering if these lights can hang in that realm as well, it's going to be a video in the description below for you guys to check out where I use these lights for some very professional looking setups. Links to all of these amazing lights will be down in the description below. I highly recommend them all. Now let's talk about this R5 Mark II. Man, the response from this camera was so underwhelming that it honestly surprised me. And I wouldn't even say that it's bad, but I think that this highlights a few things. I think the first thing that it highlights is that cameras have just plateaued. Like, everything is good. You can buy any camera right now and it's going to look amazing. I doubt that we will ever get that exact same hype as when the GH5 dropped or when the original R5 was going against the A7S III. While that hype is fun to look back on, I think that realistically, it has made people expect a huge upgrade every single time a flagship is announced. I think the R5 Mark II actually does improve on a lot from the original R5, but I think overall people are just over the possibility of their camera overheating when they shoot at the best possible resolution. I also think it's kind of hilarious that they're selling an air conditioner for an additional $400 when all you're going to hear in your camera audio is wind. Another thing that I thought I was tripping about too as well that I just looked up is why in the world does the R5 Mark II cost $400 more than the original R5? Is that just inflation or is it like, why? What is that about? Another thing that I just read an article about that I thought was really weird is that Canon is potentially not allowing the R5 Mark II to work with third-party batteries, which I see as being a potential problem in itself with supply issues. If you're not going to let other manufacturers make batteries for the camera, hopefully you can upkeep with the amount of batteries that are going to be necessary for people who want to buy multiple. And then another thing that I didn't even mention was that Canon also locked down the RF mount so that other manufacturers couldn't make autofocus compatible lenses on it. It's a lot. I feel like people are just sick of Canon at this point. All in all, is the majority of the outcry online from people who were never going to buy the camera in the first place? Yes. Does the R5 Mark II deserve all the hate that it's getting? Maybe, but I don't think so. But if I think that the camera isn't as bad as a lot of people are making it seem, then why in the world did I sell all of my Canon gear and switch to Sony? I bought my first camera a little over a decade ago, and it was a Canon. Ever since then, I've owned a Canon and used the Canon to some extent. When I went to Lumix for the GH4, I still owned and used the Canon camera. When I went to Sony for the A6300, I still owned and used the Canon camera. So on and so forth. This is the first time in my career where I've actually sold all of my Canon gear and completely switched to another brand, which is Sony. Here's why though. For the past decade, I've been a freelance music video director working on sets, small and large, but I've been gradually tapering off into full-time content creation online. As I've been gradually tapering off from being on sets, I've also gradually been downgrading my camera to work for the type of work that I'm currently doing. I went from the C200 down to the smaller, more compact C70 as my music video production slowed down. Then I went from the C70 down to the even more smaller R5C as my production slowed down more than that. Canon cinema options are absolutely fantastic, by the way. Just wanted to say that. All of these cameras are good, man. But this really all boiled down to me not being on sets anymore. I'm full-time content creation right now, and the kit that I just had wasn't convenient for that at all. Like, the R5C is an incredible camera for productions. I love it. I think that it's awesome. But the battery life on it was trash, which means that you kind of always had to have it rigged up to use it. When you're trying to be light and nimble to make YouTube videos, you really don't want to have a V-Lite battery on your camera. And the R8 was tiny. It had portability going for it. It checked a lot of boxes for me. But I kid you not, every time I took this camera out once the summer started, it would overheat. So it was unreliable in that aspect. And I also feel like the autofocus just was not sticky. It was fast, but it would hunt a lot. And I'm not gonna say that the A7C Mark II is better than both of those cameras, but I think that the A7C Mark II is 100% better than both of those cameras at what I'm currently doing. Like, I love the fact that this camera is tiny. It runs off SD cards. The low light is great. The log profile is amazing. I like the fact that it also still accepts power delivery. So if I want to throw a V-Lite battery on here and get into a production setting, I can do that really fast. It's to the point where I don't even think about the things that I gave up to come to the system. And not only is this camera extremely convenient for creating content, it's proven to be a workhorse on productions as well. I had this out in the desert in 110-degree weather. It didn't overheat at all. The footage came out amazing. Like, I can do it all on this camera, and it's so freaking small. Another thing that I'm loving about this ecosystem as well is that the E-mount lens set is so vast, and if you want to venture out and get lenses from third-party manufacturers like Tamron or Sigma, you can do that. I think that that's really dope. In the past, when I had Sony cameras, I was always one foot out and one foot in with Canon, so I had a ton of different EF lenses, and I would just adapt those lenses to my Sony cameras. And I was never really taking advantage of how great Sony's autofocus is. But now I can do it all. I don't have to use an adapter either, and my setup is so much smaller. Look, man, Sony's great, Nikon's great, Canon's great, Fuji's great, Lumix is great. Everything's awesome. Everything looks amazing. I think it's all about choosing the right tool for the job. And for me, I feel like at this current point in my career, the A7C Mark II is that. But I want to leave y'all with a question, and you can let me know the answer down in the comment section below. Are you on Sony? And if not, why not? I would love to know. But that being said, I'm out, y'all. I'm gonna see you on the next video. Peace.